Welcome to yet another episode where I take you down some history of place names. Today we will be focusing on the locality known as T Nagar. The very thought of it brings to mind overcrowded retail outlets with a never-ending stream of shoppers. Most people, if you name T Nagar, would immediately say that is the retail capital of Chennai. No matter whether there has been a flood or an earthquake or a cyclone the previous day, people will be thronging to T Nagar's shops at all points of time of the day. Such is their hunger for products being sold over there. In many ways, it's also a celebration. Where else can so many local brands have made it so big? Saravana Stores, RMKV, Pothys, and then the grandfather of them all, that oldest brand that has continued ever since we can remember and is always remaining at the top, Nalli's. And so, all these brands put together make it a shopper's paradise and a nightmare as well. Oddly enough, T Nagar was not meant for shopping at all. When it was constructed, it was considered to be a premier residential area. And when you walk down some of those streets, you still see remnants of that wonderful past. Huge bungalows, large gardens, lots of setback, plenty of age-old trees. And then you reflect on what we have made T Nagar today. The growth of T Nagar really begins in 1920 when the Town Planning Act was passed, and then the government began working on developing a new area in the city. It is significant that T Nagar is really the first planned locality of the city after the British Crown took over the administration of India. Prior to the arrival of T Nagar, almost every other locality was a relict of the East India Company days. You name the old locality and it had something to do with that colonial past. And then for a good 70 years there was no development, and only in 1920 came this fresh development called T Nagar. And in order to develop T Nagar, they had to do a significant amount of environmental degradation. More on that when I take you down the maps and the figures that make up T Nagar.
Difficult though it is to imagine today, there was no development to the west of Mount Road till 1920. The reason for that is that all that area was occupied by one large water body, which was known as the Long Tank of Mylapore, and it spanned 77 acres. It started roughly where the Gemini intersection is today and went all the way up to where we have the Nandanam signal, and from there it then went off in a westerly direction. It was quite an enormous water body, and during British times, particularly after 1799, it became fashionable for some of the British to build large garden bungalows by its banks and spend their weekends in them. Which is why you had houses such as Blackers Gardens, which is where the Congress grounds stand today, Abbotsbury, which is today Hyatt Regency, Lakeside, which is now a hospital, and several other such bungalows, all of which are completely forgotten. Having taken over this 77 acres of water body and drained it, T Nagar came to be developed. It seems quite a tragedy today considering how water-starved we are. But in those days, people did not consider such water bodies to be of much use. And then they also acquired land from Mambalam and Puliyur. Since the bulk of T Nagar came to be developed on parts of what was the eastern side of Mambalam, the western part of it became West Mambalam. And that is the reason why we don't see an East Mambalam at all, even today.
Judging by the names that have been given to the various streets, it is possible to date when they were really laid out. The bulk of T Nagar appears to have been planned and completed between 1920 and 1928. because it bears the names of a certain set of people who played a very, very important role in various ways in the city's history and also in the history of Madras Presidency, which later became the state of Tamil Nadu. The Justice Party was in power for much of the time that T Nagar was developed. And you must remember that the Justice Party was the first political outfit that enjoyed power in office. Founded in 1916, fundamentally as an anti-Brahmin platform, it brought together several people who spoke Tamil and Telugu. The founders were Dr. C. Natesa Mudaliar, Sir Pitti Tyagaraya Chetty, and Dr. T.M. Nair. Later, other stalwarts such as the Raja of Panagal joined this party. The real name of the party, incidentally, was the South Indian Liberation Front, but because it ran a newspaper called The Justice, it came to be referred to as the Justice Party. T Nagar was developed when Indians were first coming to power. Just around the time that work on T Nagar started, under the Dayaki system following the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, the Justice Party came to power in Madras and formed the government. In that era, the bulk of the powers remained with the governor and his council, but certain portfolios were handed over to 3 ministers, all of whom were from the Justice Party. You must remember that the Congress was boycotting the elections in those days and the Justice Party was winning them hands down. The first minister of Madras, also known as the Prime Minister of Madras, was A. Subbarayulu Reddyar, and when he stepped down, the Raja of Panagal became the next Prime Minister of Madras and held office between 1921 and 1926. And it was during his time that the bulk of T Nagar was developed. Which is why, when you walk down T Nagar, you will find that most of the streets are named after ministers, Justice Party worthies, and then corporation commissioners and functionaries of the corporation who all were in office between the period 1920 and 1930 at most. There are certain streets that are named after people who came to prominence after the 1930s, but they are very few and far between.
The acquisition of land for T Nagar began in 1920. By 1924, further land, apart from the long tank of Mylapore that is, was acquired from Mambalam, Puliyur and the government farm villages and a portion of the Mylapore division comprising a total of 540 acres. In its time, it was one of the most significant developments, modelled very much on the lines of which New Delhi had been developed, with a large park as its focus from which radiated 3 arterial roads, all connecting to Mount Road. The land in between these was made over for development, 410 acres earmarked for private development, and the rest being given to open spaces that would be developed as parks and for the construction of public buildings, police stations, electric substations, markets, bazaars, fruit stalls, hospitals, dispensaries, pumping stations, model schools, places of worship, industrial buildings and government offices. The entire plan was developed by the corporation in association with the Madras City and Suburban Town Planning Trust. Housing plots were divided into 1, half, quarter, 1/8, 1/12 and 1/18 of an acre. The cost of acquisition of the land, 540 acres, was rupees 4.9 lakhs. Though the plan was ready by 1924, work on the area began only 10 years later. By then, the Justice Party had long been in power, and several of its stalwarts were to be commemorated in street names in the area. P. Ramaraya Ningar, or the Raja of Panagal, as I said earlier, became the second Prime Minister of Madras, and therefore Panagal Park, as it should be rightfully called, was named after him. It still remains the focal point of the entire T Nagar area. Inside Panagal Park is a beautiful but small statue of the Raja of Panagal. For several years, it was relegated to the backside of the park, with the center of the park being occupied by a bust of King George V, unveiled in 1935 by Sir Mohammad Usman. In the recent years, that bust has vanished, and the Raja of Panagal statue has rightfully been brought to the center. Also of great interest in Panagal Park is the Radio House, which is a circular building that stands right in the middle of this garden. This is a throwback to that early era when radio broadcasting was at its infancy and not many people had a radio set in their house. They would then flock to the park where a loudspeaker would be on a pole and they would be able to listen to radio programs. The actual mechanism which switched on the loudspeaker was located in the radio house that you see in the middle of the park. Panagal Park, even today, remains a great lung for T. Nagar. Radiating from Panagal Park are three important roads. The first road is the one that sets off straight from Panagal Park, going all the way down and finally cutting across Mount Road and then joining Eldams Road. This is rightfully named Tyagaraya Road after Sir Pitti Tyagaraya Chetty. Belonging to a very prosperous family of businessmen whose interests were principally into cloth, Tyagaraya Chetty lived in Tandayarpet all his life, where, very interestingly, his family residence is divided by a road going in the middle and a bridge connecting the two parts of the residence on either side. It is probably the only private bridge in existence in the whole of the city. But we remember him more importantly for being the first Indian to become the president of the Corporation of Madras in the year 1919. That is a post that we would today equate with that of the mayor. Known for always being in his trademark white and for his bushy whiskers, Tyagaraya Chetty was known to be a very, very scrupulously honest man. In fact, it is said that he was offered the position of the Prime Minister of Madras Presidency, but he refused because he believed that he had a more important role to play in the Corporation of Madras and in carrying on the administration of the city, which is why Tyagaraya Road and T. Nagar are both named after him. We have two other roads, as I said, radiating out from Panagal Park to Mount Road, and the first of these is G.N. Chetty Road, named after Diwan Bahadur Gopati Narayanaswamy Chetty. G.N. Chetty was the first treasurer of the Justice Party. After the Justice Party came to power, with T. Nagar's development being one of the most important projects in the city, many of its prominent members got streets named after them. And thus you have the Natesa Mudaliyar Park, which is named after one of the founders. The other founder, Dr. T.M. Nair, is commemorated on Dr. Nair Road. O. Thanigachalam Chetty, who was one of the very prominent Justice Party figures in the Legislative Council and also in the Corporation of Madras, was a very, very prominent lawyer. And he has Thanigachalam Road named after him. T.N. Sivajnanam Pillai was a minister in the Justice Party cabinet, one of the various cabinets, and Sivajnanam Road is named after him. Sivaprakasa Mudaliyar was one of the founders of the Justice Party as well, and Sivaprakasa Road is after him. We also have, in addition, Muhammad Usman, Sir Muhammad Usman, who came from a very prominent family of Muslims of the Tanjavur region and who became very active in Justice Party politics and later specialized as a practitioner of Unani medicine. Sir Muhammad Usman was the first Indian to act as a governor of Madras Presidency, and therefore Usman Road, both North Usman Road and South Usman Road, take their names after him. After exhausting all the worthies of the Justice Party, it would appear that T. Nagar was next used for naming people who played important roles in the Corporation of Madras. And it is very interesting to see that some of them had such a fleeting role to play in the corporation, and yet they are commemorated in T Nagar. The first of these is Diwan Bahadur Thodla Raghavaiah, who acted as president of the Madras Corporation for just 2 days. He is better remembered today for the roles that he played as the Diwan of Travancore and later in Pudukota. And yet we have Raghavaiah Road, which commemorates him. Similarly, we see Sarti Vijay Raghavacharya commemorated in Vijay Raghava Road. Though he had a stellar role to play in the Madras Civil Services and in the Madras Legislative Council, his association with the corporation as its president was just fleeting. He occupied that post just for 2 months. In comparison to these, V. Thirumalai Pillai, after whom Thirumalai Road is named, was president of the corporation, and he was an elected president, therefore like the mayor, and he fulfilled his full term apart from being a very active member of the Justice Party. After all these people, the tenure of J.C. Maloney is positively impressive because he was president of the Corporation of Madras for a full 5 years, from 1914 to 1919, and Maloney Road is after him, though it has now been transformed into Melanie Road, probably because Griffith Road is just next door to it. We have no idea who Griffith was, but chances are that Griffith was an important member of the Madras Corporation, perhaps an ICS officer. Maloney has written a fascinating book, a book of Southern India as he called it, and in it he gives a very humorous account of Madras city and, more importantly, of the way the Corporation of Madras functioned. We then have other members of the ICS who went on to become commissioners of Madras Corporation, and here they are commemorated in T Nagar as well. We have H. Burkitt, and then we have Sir George T. Bogue, after whom Bogue Road, now renamed as Chevalier Shivaji Ganesan Road, was named. Bogue had a stellar career in Madras. He rose to become cabinet secretary and later became the governor of the province of Orissa. We also have Venkat Narayana Road, named after Diwan Bahadur J. Venkat Narayana Naidu, who was commissioner of the Madras Corporation, a member of the ICS. He went on to become a very important figure in governance in Madras, and later also a very important figure in the Indian Fine Arts Society, one of the early sabhas of the city. After these commissioners, it is very interesting to see certain other officials of the Madras Corporation being commemorated here. The first of these is Madley, after whom Madley Subway is named. J.W. Madley is the father of the Keelpok Waterworks and perhaps deserves a photograph in our puja rooms because it is thanks to him that our city still gets water. Then we have Hensman, J.E. Hensman, after whom Hensman Road is named, and he too was a very important member of the Madras Corporation, principally being responsible for the water supply. And then we have J.R. Coates, yet another functionary in the corporation.
For some reason, T Nagar was largely bilingual. Perhaps it is a reflection of the Justice Party ethos. You had lots of Tamils and you had a lot of Telugu speaking people as well. In fact, it was jokingly said that you could survive in T Nagar without knowing a word of Tamil because people could speak Telugu so well. And in yet another strangely interesting feature of Madras, most of the Telugus who settled down in T Nagar had something to do with the film industry. Some of them became very, very prominent. Savitri, Chittur V. Nagaya, S.V. Rangarao, Kannamba, and then B.N. Reddy, Bommi Reddy, Narasimhulu Reddy, after whom there is a road named in T Nagar, B.N. Reddy Road, which later became B.N. Road because we abolished caste names, and then it became Dr. B. Narasimhan Road, which has no connection with the man after whom it was named originally. But nevertheless, it is a tribute to the cinema history of T Nagar. T Nagar also had some landmark film theatres in it, let's not forget them. also owned by film actors. So Rajkumari Theatre was owned by T.R. Rajkumari, who lived in T. Nagar, and Nagesh Theatre was owned by the comedian Nagesh, who of course was not a resident of T. Nagar, but lived on St. Mary's Road, not very far away from there.
Some streets in T. Nagar take their names from prominent residents or people who occupied a large chunk of the property on that street. Under this head would come names such as Krishna Rao Naidu Street and Mailai Ranganatha Mudaliar Street. In the midst of all this, we also have Nathamuni Street and Govindu Street. Who were Nathamuni and Govindu? Most interestingly, they were two humble people who were involved in digging the roads and laying the drains when T. Nagar was being planned. The road caved in on them and both of them were killed on the spot. The roads that take their names commemorate these two heroes who did much work for which we hardly remember them today. Finally, there is Ranganathan Street. Whom does Ranganathan Street take its name from? Strangely enough, from no political leader, no employee of the Madras Corporation, no ICS officer, no prominent resident. It is named after God himself, Almighty God. Ranganathan Street takes its name from Lord Ranganatha Swami of Srirangam.
T. Nagar is also very interesting in the sense that it has had certain number of written material on it. For instance, Ashokamitran, the author, lived in Westmambalam from the 1950s onwards, and he had a bird's eye view of how T. Nagar grew during his time. And in his magnificent work, Oru Parvaiyil Chennai Nagaram, he devotes quite a number of pages to T. Nagar in his usual sardonic fashion, with a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor about the way the place functions. The other book, which I would strongly recommend to you, is Nalli Kuppuswamy Chetty's Tyagaraya Nagar Andrum Indrum. It's a book written with a lot of love and affection for that area by a man who has lived there for practically his whole life and who also defines the trade of T. Nagar in many ways. It talks about how the streets developed in front of his eyes, some of the prominent personalities who lived there, and it also talks about the problems of T. Nagar today. So between these two books, you get a very good idea of what T. Nagar is all about. Thank you so much for listening in, and I'm sure I'll be back with you soon with lots more history of Chennai and its streets. Bye for now.